Creating consistent quality content for your B2B brand can drive tremendous results and a massive amount of revenue. But the problem is creating that consistent quality content is hard, especially if you don't have a structure. So what we're going to talk about in this video is a structure called the content waterfall. That will help you use your podcast to create consistent quality content, not just in audio format for the podcast, but feeding all of your other channels and tactics in your B2B content marketing game. You work really hard to create a lot of content and to make it good. So if that struggle to create consistent quality content gets you down and you're not able to produce high quality, you're not able to produce on a consistent basis, you're missing out on the results, especially the revenue that content can drive. So let's talk about how you can use your B2B podcast as the top of your content waterfall strategy. So what the heck is a content waterfall?
What the hell is that?
A content waterfall strategy is content created in a defined structure designed to fuel all of your content marketing strategy. So let's talk about a few examples of this content waterfall strategy in action. If you're watching this video, you undoubtedly know who Gary Vee is. And you've probably heard of some of his previous YouTube shows like Ask Gary Vee or Daily Vee.
I do not know how to live in life. I do not know how to live in life. Live in life.
Most recently, one of his ongoing consistent shows that serves as a content waterfall for VaynerMedia is the Gary Vee Audio Experience. The Gary Vee Audio Experience is a podcast, but it feeds so much more of the content strategy coming from Gary Vee and his team. You'll often hear the podcast and then see a video clip on Instagram or LinkedIn coming from those same interviews and those same conversations on the podcast. You might also see concepts broken down into cartoon slide deck form on LinkedIn or again on Instagram coming from the Gary Vee Audio Experience. So I probably don't need to beat you over the head with the fact that Gary Vee and his team are masters at repurposing content.
What's the idea?
So I want to share another example that will be even more applicable to you as a B2B marketer. Compared to VaynerMedia, we are a much smaller team here at Sweetfish.
Well, Byron, surprisingly, it's just me.
Probably much more like your team within your own B2B brand. Yet, we're able to use this same content waterfall strategy to create that consistent quality content that has helped build our brand and establish us as thought leaders in the B2B podcasting space. So I want to encourage you, even if you don't have the resources and the manpower of a VaynerMedia, the content waterfall strategy can help you with the struggle to create consistent quality content and make sure that you don't miss out on the results, especially that revenue that can come from that consistent quality content. So let's look at our own content waterfall strategy in action here at Sweetfish. For over 1,500 episodes, we've produced a daily podcast on B2B growth.
Wow.
For a long time, those episodes just were what they were. They were podcast episodes. But over time, we have found multiple ways to allow the podcast to become the waterfall I'm talking about and serve our entire content strategy. There are 4 ways that the content waterfall strategy works in action. 1, repurposing content and turning it into micro content for different channels. Number 2, expanding on existing content when new types of micro content become available to your team. Number 3, over time, you'll have the ability to revisit your backlog of content and allow it to feed this waterfall even more. Number 4, tactically, I want to talk about how you split up the work to make this waterfall flow even more. All right, let's talk about the content types. When I finish hosting an episode on B2B Growth, there are multiple defined content types that we've built systems for creating out of each episode. Some of those include micro videos. These are 20-second to 2-minute clips where our guest said something punchy, maybe controversial, and we have a process for putting those into a branded frame, adding subtitles, and a progress bar. These micro videos can be used on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on other social channels, or embedded in email. One of our B2B Growth episodes might also go to a writer to turn it into a 200 to 300 word LinkedIn post. They could also turn it into an email for a newsletter or some sort of nurture cadence. Since we're talking about writers, if it's a good episode that is worthy of a blog post, you could turn that into a 500, 1,000, or 2,000 word blog article for your site as well.
Trick number 1.
Let's jump back to video. You could also turn the full-length interview into a YouTube video. So you've got micro videos, you've got full-length videos, you've got content you can turn into written format for LinkedIn, for email, for your blog. So we've got video and written content. What about graphics? There are a few other ways that we regularly practice turning our podcast content into micro content further down the waterfall. These might be episode graphics with a big picture of the host profile photo. They might be quote graphics where you have a writer identify that punchy quote that your guest said during the interview. You might turn them into slide decks that could be used on LinkedIn or on Instagram for carousel posts. I think you see where I'm going here. You don't need a massive team like VaynerMedia to determine a few types of micro content that your podcast can turn into so that you are using this content waterfall strategy as the structure to take content and turn it into more so that you don't fight that losing battle of trying to create consistent quality content in different types for different channels and starting from scratch every time. The second thing I want to talk about within this strategy is expansion ideas. As you start to create more content in this structure, coming from one format that serves as the top of the waterfall, contributing to other tactics and channels, you'll find ways to not just repurpose content, but to expand on it. For instance, we've been doing original research, asking a set of 10 to 15 questions pre and post interview.
We're going to play a wonderful game called Who is Your Daddy and What Does He Do?
Of our guests on B2B Growth. Now that can turn into some great original research content, but it can also turn into other types of micro content. If we notice a trend, we could record a follow-up episode for the podcast that then can turn into micro videos or a blog post. So look at every content creation opportunity, not as a one-off thing, but something that can feed other content opportunities downstream. That's how you get momentum with your content waterfall strategy. Let's talk about revisiting a backlog. You know, there were hundreds of episodes of B2B Growth that stood alone as just podcast episodes. We could go back to our backlog once we had that established and look for trends. Every time that we interviewed someone within a certain type of company or a certain industry or talking about a certain theme, maybe LinkedIn or account-based marketing, you can do the same with your podcast. Once you develop a backlog library, you can go back to that and look for ways to repurpose that content as well. Even if those episodes did feed the waterfall already with micro videos and YouTube videos and written content, there might be a way to look at a subset of that back catalog and find even more content to flow downstream. All right, hopefully I've shown you how the content waterfall strategy can help you with that struggle to create consistent quality content that's going to lead to revenue results. But how do you tactically go about it? Part of this structure is not just starting with original content and having it flow downstream to other channels and other content types, but it's also dividing the work for maximum efficiency. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. I mentioned those micro videos. So let's say I interview a guest on B2B Growth. That episode often doesn't go directly to a videographer on our team to create those micro videos that I talked about. It would first go to a writer to write a headline for that micro video, to pick the clip out of the episode that's most compelling, and then it would go on to a videographer to do the video work. So we don't have videographers serving as content coaches, and we don't have writers trying to work with video editing software. So that might look different for you. It might be dividing the work between members of your team plus some outside contractors or freelancers on Upwork or Fiverr, or a podcast agency like Sweetfish.
You need a computer whiz.
I know everything there is to know about computers, okay? All the Twitters, I know them.
So whatever the team is you have at your disposal, think about the content types that you want to create through this content waterfall strategy, and then divide the work efficiently according to each skill set and the bandwidth each team member has. All right, you get it now. You've got the structure in your mind for the content waterfall strategy. It's going to help you take each piece of content and feed other content types across different channels without recreating content from scratch every single time. Jot down at least 5 types of content that your team could create from each and every podcast episode. Think about what will work best on your existing channels. Think about the team you have to be able to create those, and the process that you have in place or could easily create to create these pieces of micro content to flow out of your new podcast. Once you have the types of content you want to create within this strategy, who's going to do the work, map that out. Use Trello or Asana or whatever project management tool you're used to using, and map out the flow from each episode to the micro pieces of content that will flow from it as your content waterfall strategy gains steam.